What's up everyone? Welcome back to the shop. Now's the time where stores have these crazy discounts on tools, but it's also a time in which people just offload tools that they don't want anymore, which means buyer's market. So let's talk about some of the tools that I would definitely want to buy if I was starting off new into woodworking or if I had to recreate my own shop. Our producers would like for us to read this important statement about tools. Tool buying is subjective. There are multiple types of woodworking, so the tools discussed in this video are focused on the generalist, the person who may make a piece of furniture one day and a box or picture frame the next. Tools are expensive. $50 to one person could feel like $500 to another. Everyone has to make decisions based off their own personal budget. That makes sense, right? If a tool is mentioned that you do not like or cannot afford, you're not being called a, quote, garbage person, end quote. Everything is subjective, and the opinions in this video are based solely on our own experiences. Garbage person? Okay. Any comments that use the words, "it must be nice," will be instantly deleted. Really? I don't make the rules, man. No one is saying that you have to buy every tool discussed in this video or these particular brands of tools. That's fair. Oh, woodworking's supposed to be fun, lighten up. We can all stand behind that one, can't we? The heart and soul of my workshop is my table saw. It's the reason why it's right in the middle of my shop. I use it almost every day for almost every project. So if I'm starting all over, I have to buy a tool. The first tool I'm buying is a table saw. Now, table saws run the gamut from the super portable contractor saws that you can throw into a van, get out, work at a job site, and then bring it home, all the way up to the stationary saws, the cabinet saws that you can't move or you don't want to move. You set it in a spot, you leave it there. And because of this wide gamut that we have, that means you got prices for saws that could be as low as $100 all the way up to tens of thousands of dollars, depending on how crazy you want to get with that saw. So where do you fall at? Okay, general rules of advice when it comes to buying a table saw. Buy the best saw that you can afford depending on your limitations and what type of woodworking you're gonna do. That might seem like a bit of a cop-out, but hear me out on this. There are a couple things that we have to definitely look for regarding the types of saws we have. We wanna make sure that it is safe, as in, is it too light? Is it gonna move around a bunch? You don't wanna be cutting a board and have your saw drifting all over the place. How's the fence operate? Does it glide smoothly? When you lock it into place, does it stay where it's supposed to be, or does it move around a lot? Is your saw repeatable? As in, if I set that fence and I make cuts, can I make repeated cuts without any sort of issues? Those are the key things when it comes to a saw. I have a dedicated shop space, so if I had to buy again, I would definitely buy a cabinet saw. Now, if I was dealing with a super limited budget where every little dollar counts, and I think all of us kind of fall into that category somewhere, then I would definitely look online, look for a used tool. So I did some shopping online to see what I could find. And what I found was several multi-thousand-dollar cabinet saws that were available for hundreds of dollars, not thousands of dollars. If I'm looking at buying a new table saw, here are some of the ones that I would be looking at. I have not used all of these saws. These are ones that would be on my list that I definitely want to check out. Let's start off with the portable, the contractor saws, the job site saws. I would definitely want to check out the rigid 4514 job site saw. It has a 10-inch blade, just like a normal saw would have, so that's great for a job site saw. And it also has a 30-inch rip capacity, which again is pretty good for that type of saw. The reviews on it are outstanding, and you can find them on sale right now for less than $400, and that counts the stand, so that's a really good deal. Another one I would look at is the DeWalt 7491 job site saw. Now this one is about double the price, it seems like, right now as the rigid. Comes with a stand, same 10-inch blade, has a 32.5-inch rip capacity, really good for a saw like this, and over 4,000 Amazon reviews. Yeah, that's a whole lot of reviews. If we jump up into the hybrid semi-portable saw category, there are two that really jump out that I would look at. And I think it's going to make sense whenever you see these. One is the Delta 36725 hybrid saw. Now, this is a saw that I actually owned the earliest model of it whenever it first hit the stands, and it was a great saw. I upgraded to a cabinet saw later on, but I had no issues with this saw whatsoever. It performed great, and the thing I really liked about it was the fence. The fence was super smooth to slide back and forth, and it locked into place really well. Another saw you can go with is the Rigid 4560. Now, if you look at this closely, you'll see it's the same one as the Delta. It's an identical saw, they just changed the color of it. In both of these cases, it's a little bit more difficult to get these saws now than it was in the past. And that tells me there's probably some sort of factory issue because they're probably made in the same factory overseas. Since I know my Delta saw was great, I figured the Rigid one's gonna be great also. So kind of a toss up, and the price is identical. After that, we can jump up to cabinet saws. Now this is where the world is your oyster depending on what your budget is gonna be. One of the first ones I would look at is the Grizzly 899 saw. It's technically listed as a hybrid saw, but you don't want to move it around. I would put it in the cabinet saw category if it was mine. 2 horsepower saw, which is a little bit of a bump because a lot of saws are usually 1 3/4 or they jump up to 3. So this one's right there in the middle. Big, hefty saw, 450 pounds. So it ain't light at all. So you don't have to worry about moving it around. Looks like it has a super nice fence. And best thing of all, $1,500. So a really good price for a saw like that. After that, I would probably look at the Grizzly 1023 cabinet saw. Now this one's not really a whole lot more, it's $2,200, so it is a bit of a bump, but it's a really nice looking saw for a cabinet saw, and especially in that price range, because a lot of cabinet saws, when you start getting into that world of 3 horsepower, they're gonna jump up probably $1,000 more than what this one is. So if you could save $1,000 and get the same type of saw, hey, definitely one to look at. And the next one on my list would be the SawStop 3 horsepower saw that is about $3,300 or so right now. This one would not be on my list previously because of the price, but what I've seen is so many table saw prices have gone up that now this one is kind of in that range that I would find more acceptable compared to the competitors. For instance, I have my Jet saw that right now is going for $3,400. I did not pay anywhere close to $3,400 for that saw. And over the years, that saw now has actually gotten more expensive than the SawStop one. I would have bought the SawStop one instead then because the saws are pretty comparable, but it also has a safety feature. Again, some of these saws I've used, a lot of them I have not used. This would just be the saws that are on my short list to check out. The next most important woodworking tool in my shop is a planer. I cannot work without a planer. I have to get one. Now, the common question comes up is, do you buy a joiner or a planer? 100% without a doubt, a planer. You can always figure out ways to flatten one side of a board and one edge of a board, but the planer opens up a ton more possibilities as far as the thicknesses of all your work pieces, so you can make a lot of stuff. I've used the same DeWalt planer for what feels like forever, and it's been great. No issues with it whatsoever, knock on wood. Now the one that I have is the model 734. There's also the newer model, which is the 735. Now in both cases, you can buy them used and get a significant discount. I've seen the 734 for $350, $400. The 735 a little bit more than that, but it's still about half the price of a new version. Something to consider with these is that these are straight knife planers and they scream like a banshee. They are incredibly loud. So you might want to consider upgrading to a helical style planer. Even if it's a benchtop planer that is still loud, it's going to be a lot quieter than a straight knife planer. But that also increases your price range. You can get a benchtop helical style planer for between $700 to $1,000. Now, from what I know, the Grizzly seems to be the cheapest version, the entry-level version to get into that world. Then you have the Rikon has one, and there's an Oliver and then a Jet one too, and there's probably a few more out there. If it's up to me, I'm buying a new planer. I'm gonna spend the extra money to get the helical style planer instead. As a smoother cut, the blades last a lot longer, and it's a little bit quieter. Since I already have a benchtop planer, if I were to upgrade today, I would probably get a freestanding helical head planer. Now, even a straight knife planer, if it's a freestanding unit, not the benchtop ones, it's going to be remarkably quiet compared to a benchtop one. It doesn't have that high-pitched scream of a noise. It's more of a low rumble sound, even if it's straight knives. The 3 that I would look at is the Grizzly 891 planer. Then there's an Oliver 15-inch planer, 3 horsepower, and there's also a jet 15-inch, 3 horsepower. So they're all the same size, they all have a helical head. The price difference is dramatic though. The Grizzly is about $1,000 cheaper than the jet. Since my experience with all this is just my old DeWalt planer that's worked out just fine for me, then I would have to definitely look at these and play around and do some more research. So just because these are on my short list of the ones that I would probably lean towards, doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. Who knows what new planers are going to come out tomorrow? And I haven't looked at them myself, so I might find some little detail about it that makes me lean one way or the other. When I'm coming up with my short list of tools that I would want to buy as my starter kit, I think about what tools I'll use the most. And I can't forget a sander. It's incredibly important to have a sander that does a good job, but also that you don't hate. Because if you hate sanding, well, you're not going to do a very good job at it. Because of my past experiences, I would opt for a more of a luxury brand sander than maybe some other people would. So I typically won't go to the big box store and pick up the DeWalt, Bosch, rigid type sanders. I'm going to go towards like the Festool sanders, and I would actually compromise another tool and take a lower quality other tool than I would a sander because, well, I've had bad sanders, I've had cheaper sanders, and I just didn't like them so much that I'll spend the extra money on the expensive one. You can get an entry-level Festool random orbit sander for about $200, a little bit more than that. That's a 5-inch sander, and it will do a great job. Now, also, you can go and get a $50 DeWalt sander too. So it's kind of up to you on what you want to get and what your price range is. The two big things that I'm looking at when it comes to a sander is the vibration. Are there any complaints about it vibrating, chattering like crazy? Because that's just going to be miserable trying to use it. And also the dust collection. That's a huge thing. That's the reason why I like the Festool sander so much, is the dust collection's fantastic. The next set of tools I'm going to get is going to be the handheld power tools, like your drills, your trim routers, or whatever else. Now the thing with this is the brand itself doesn't really matter as much because they're all kind of comparable. So if you like Milwaukee over DeWalt or Makita over Bosch, cool, whatever. All those brands typically make all the different types of tools. The thing is you want to stick with one brand ideally, that way you could use the same battery pack for whatever tools you have. Those are the primary categories of tools that I would buy if I was looking at getting into woodworking or establishing a new shop. Now there are a couple tools that I would say fall into a secondary category for me, which would be a bandsaw, a drum sander, and then a full-size router. I would look into a 14-inch bandsaw, something with a high resaw capacity. There are some 14-inch bandsaws that only have a capacity of about 6 inches tall, but most of those have been kind of phased out, and most of them have more like the 12 to 13-inch resaw capacity. Other thing I would look for is the height of the fence. Okay, I want a tall fence so I could push my workpiece up against that. If it has a smaller fence, then it can drift a little bit more. I've gotten to the point where it's hard for me to work without a drum sander, to the point where I would almost put it as a primary tool in my workshop, but I know that for a lot of people it wouldn't be. Now for a drum sander, I would say that you don't have to go crazy with this unless you plan to make the most insane, biggest things in the world. So you could get a drum sander that's 12 to 16 inches, and that's perfectly fine because usually with a drum sander, it's open-ended on one side. So whatever that is, the 16 inches, really you would double that and that's your max capacity. And a lot of us aren't going to be sanding stuff that's going to be over 30 inches wide. And then I would put a full-size router actually at the bottom of my second tier list. And that's because I just typically don't use a router a whole lot. Or if I do, I use my trim router more than my full-size router. So when it comes to a full-size router, I would go with something that is just out there that's proven, like my Bosch. I have the Bosch router. It's the same router that's been out there for years and years and years. 1 billion of them have been sold. I'm on my second version of one. They're good routers. Now, if you use yours for a lot of stuff, you are a router woodworker, then maybe you want to upgrade and go with something like a Festool or whatever. But that's just not the way that I would work. So that went way down on my list as far as a priority tool. Now there's probably a couple tools on this list that you're a little bit surprised that aren't on there, like the miter saw. I'm not a miter saw woodworker. I don't use my miter saw all that often. Usually I'm gonna cut all my boards over at the table saw. If I have super long boards and I'm just doing rough cuts, I'll use a jigsaw, a handheld power tool, something like that. So miter saws for me, not even a consideration. I would get so many other tools before I even touch a miter saw. But that's just the way that I would work. Maybe you do things differently. I also didn't talk about dust collection, and that's because, well, there's so many different options for that. When I started off woodworking, I just got a shop vac and I literally just wheeled it from tool to tool, and that worked out fine for me. Now, I have a bigger dust collector now because I have all my tools permanently in place and I can do that. But if I'm just starting off in a shop, a simple shop vac will do a world of good. That's my list of the types of tools that I would look at buying if I were to build a new shop or if I was just getting started into the hobby. So hopefully that helps you out. Now let me give a big shout out to the newest members of our superhero community over on Patreon: John Sanchez, Paul Sheffield, Charles Cortez, the Crafting Texan, and Ken. Thank you so much for all of your support over on Patreon. If you're interested in signing up, we got a ton of awesome perks and there's a lot of awesome people over there. You get some behind the scenes, some sneak peeks. We even have perks where me and you, one-on-one, virtual chat. Hey, what's up? What you want to talk about? Yeah, undivided attention. All kinds of cool stuff over there. So head on over to patreon.com/NewtonMakes. Check it out. See if it works for you. It's a big help, big support of this channel. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, consider subscribing to the channel. And until we meet again, get in your shop and build something awesome. Bye.